Hi, friends. It's Sarah. I don't know about you, but recently I've been in kind of a nostalgia place and rewatching some old favorite TV shows. One of which has really struck me by how relevant it is today. That is Babylon 5. Babylon 5 first aired in 1994 and was almost exclusively written by the writer and producer J. Michael Straczynski. It's unusual for one writer to write the entirety of a show, and it makes for remarkable consistency. He conceived of Babylon 5 as a novel for television, with 5 chapters, one for each season. And he had the basics of the whole thing mapped out before they began shooting. There were some adjustments along the way, but largely what we see is what he had mapped out. This is an absolute feast for story nerds. The foreshadowing, the setups and payoffs, there is a consistency here that is impressive.
It was the dawn of the third age of mankind. The year is 2258. The name of the place is Babylon 5.
So humans have gone to space and built colonies and met aliens. Lots of aliens. But this isn't Roddenberry's future. Now, I love Star Trek. Someday I'll do a video on how much I love Star Trek. But this is different. Humans aren't any more perfect here than we are now. They still have disease, economic disparity, prejudice, and there is still war. Specifically, 10 years before the beginning of the story, war with a species called the Membari, a war which began over a misunderstanding and nearly annihilated the human race. To stop anything like that from happening again, Earth's governments decided to build a sort of UN in space. They call it the last best hope for peace. And that is Babylon 5. And it's home to the characters in the story.
And so we begin.
The main characters want to build peace. But how do you build peace? It's not that easy. And they're caught between two alien races with an ancient grudge. Actually, they're caught between two sets of aliens with super ancient grudges. Meanwhile, they have to deal with the rise of fascism in Earth's government, the persecution of a minority, in this case the telepaths, along with running a whole community in space and their own interpersonal, intrapersonal stuff. And yet it's all weaved together very well. When I first watched the show, I thought the fascism stuff was a bit heavy-handed. Watching it now, nope, not that heavy-handed. And besides, as my friend Josh is wont to say, some anvils need to be dropped.
Why are you here?
Well, I'm me. I'm going to start with the costumes and the design stuff. I love it. It's a really specific world. All of the alien races have their own cultural design, and it puts you into the place, makes you feel like you're dealing with real cultures. And yes, it is camp. The CGI particularly is dated. This is a particular kind of camp that I'm quite fond of, where you have very high ambitions and you just don't have the budget, but you do the best you can, and that leaves this kind of camp effect. So yeah, it's camp, but this is like theater. If you just let your imagination go with it, it's worth it for the story. I love this world, and I love the people in it.
Why?
There is the human command staff, first led by Commander Sinclair, whose actor had to leave after the first season for extra-textual reasons. But Straczynski weaves his departure into the narrative, and it works. He's replaced by Captain Sheridan, who is quite lovely and has a very solid arc. He forms part of a terrific working together and loving together partnership that becomes quite beautiful. Then there's a group of ambassadors and their aides. There's the ethereal Delenn, ambassador from the Minbari. There is the fabulous double act of Londo and Jakar. Yes, Londo Mollari. And would you believe me, friends, if I tell you that this guy has one of the best executed and most compelling arcs I have seen in fiction? Yeah, this guy.
But in purple, I am stunning.
The guy with the hair. And Jakar is almost his equal, in an opposite kind of way. Love it. And there's Security Chief Michael Garibaldi, who is the best parts of a noir detective with a heart of gold and a Daffy Duck fixation. And he has a smart aleck deputy. And speaking of deputies, Mollari's deputy, Veer, I kind of love him. There's a beautiful and charming knight-errant that turns up later. Oh boy, he has the most beautiful hair in the show. Except maybe this guy. Okay, I kind of miss 90s goth boys. And their hair. And there's a doctor with workaholic issues. I mean, there's a doctor who being a doctor. And we're not done. There's a few telepaths. There's Lita Alexander and Talia Winters. And occasionally, there is Esther. He's not hunting Alameda for nuclear vessels.
Nuclear vessels.
I never knew I wanted to see Chekhov as a secret policeman from a fascist organization. But you know what? Love it.
Show a little gratitude.
And best for last, we come to Commander Susan Ivanova. Kind of love her. It's 1994, and we have a fully developed female character. A beautiful woman who is allowed to be beautiful and sexy without being objectified. Who loves her work and isn't defined by her relationships or her lack of relationships. And who finds her own way to mix femininity and badassery. She's fierce, and she's fiercely proud of her Russianness and of her Jewishness. And it has to be, with coding and quietly said, but she's bi. For the early 90s, and honestly even for now, the representation across the board is really good. The women are people, not plot devices. We don't actually see any same-sex relationships exactly, but it's included in the text explicitly that same-sex marriage exists and is treated as normal. And we never get any no homo, which, relief. And although apart from the doctor, the cast is largely white, they make a real effort to display humanity in all its diversity. Sometimes it's a little heavy-handed, but like I said, that's not always a bad thing. And it feeds into the theme.
Humans form communities.
How do you build a community with people who are different from you? Who have different ideas and different ways of living? And how you find common ground and build something together. It's about how you build community and how you run community. How you find a balance between order and chaos, between anarchy and authority. How you make that work. And it's about the relationship between yourself and the community. What happens when you give too much of yourself to community? And what is your duties to community? Your religious duty, your family duty, the press's duty to the truth, a leader's duty to the people they lead, a person's duty to their work, to themselves, to other people, to their country. While it is about community with people who are different from us, tolerance, compassion, all of these things that build a community, there is also repeatedly the theme of the line. Where do you draw the line? Compromise is important in the story world, But there are things we do not compromise. Tolerance is valued, but there are things we do not tolerate. As Veer tells us, some things come with too high a price. Like I said, in this rewatch, I've been struck with how relevant so much of this is to today. Are these not the questions that we are asking in our communities, in our fandoms, in our families, in our countries? What do we tolerate? Where is the line? And how do we live together with people who have different views from us? Are there things that come with too high a price?
Because sometimes peace is another word for surrender.
I love Babylon 5, and I've loved this rewatch, revisiting this world. But this is not the future I want. And it isn't meant to be. My favorite writer, Terry Pratchett, wrote, "Humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape." He told us we need stories to believe the big lies. Justice, duty, mercy. Because we have to believe in them to make them real. That's the sort of story Babylon 5 is. This is humanity as we are. Flawed, imperfect, messy creatures trying to do our best. And Babylon 5 is telling us that our best is when we work together. When we try to build together something that is greater than ourselves. That it is in each other that we find the last best hope for peace.
But always it is the same voice. It is the voice of our ancestors speaking through us. And the voice of our inheritors waiting to be born. It is the small, still voice that says, we are one.
This is my second favorite thing in the universe.
Because there's no one knows his way around outer space like Dodgers in the 24th and a half